How do you define a bad relationship? You might have heard all about the different signs of a toxic relationship, how to get out of a dangerous relationship, and everything in between. But how do you know when it all begins? The signs are there, but to a lot of people, they can appear harmless in some cases. But in some cases, even if you manage to get out, these bad relationships can still haunt you. 22-year-old Giulia Cecchettin had just ended a bad relationship. She looked forward to graduating with a degree in biomedical engineering. But just a few days shy of her graduation, Giulia went missing, and not long after, her body was found in a gully near Lake Barsis, Barcheese, on November 18, 2022. But what happened to Giulia? Why was she so viciously attacked? Who did this to her? Well, the answer was there, clear as day from the get-go, but it didn't surface until Giulia tragically lost her life, leaving her family and the rest of Italy in a deep pit of sorrow and fear. The terrible case of Giulia Cecchettin hits close to home for Italy because, sadly, Giulia was a victim of a problem that was far too prevalent in the Italian community. Giulia Cecchettin was born on May 5, 2001, to parents Gino and Monica. The couple also had 2 more children, a daughter named Elena and a son named Davide. The family lived in Padua, Italy, and this is also where the rest of the case takes place. Giulia was defined as a headstrong and caring girl who was always there to help. She was also very gentle and loving. Even if Giulia disliked someone, she would be polite and mature about it. That certainly didn't mean that she didn't have any boundaries and let people walk all over her. Rather, she preferred handling uncomfortable situations by communicating and sorting them out. Giulia was also smart as a whip. She wasn't the type of student who didn't know what she wanted to do. She had a plan for everything. She was fond of biology, healthcare, technology, and engineering. She saw herself working in the field of biomedicine, and that was exactly what she did after high school. Giulia enrolled in the University of Padua, Italy, and she pursued a degree in biomedical engineering in 2020. Just taking a look at her career choice should be enough to tell you Giulia wasn't your average person. She was incredibly smart, gifted, and special. Giulia was genuinely happy with her choice of study because it meant that she could work in 2 fields that she was passionate about. It also helped that it was a 3-year program, and fast forward to 2023, Giulia was looking forward to graduation. But at the University of Padua, Giulia met someone. He was a fellow student, Filippo Turetta. Filippo was in the same program as Giulia. He was also majoring in biomedical engineering, and he, like anyone who met and interacted with Giulia, was enamored by her. Giulia and Filippo didn't meet right away after starting college. In fact, they met in 2022, when both of them were more than halfway through their studies. Giulia took an interest in Filippo, and the two started dating around the same time. Giulia even affectionately addressed Filippo as Pippo in their regular and text conversations. Things were okay in the beginning, with the couple constantly being affectionate with one another, but the relationship didn't last long. About 1 to 1.5 years into the relationship, in the summer of 2023, when Giulia was about to graduate, the couple broke up. But the thing is, at the young age of 22, both Giulia and Filippo had their whole lives ahead of them. This breakup was more of a minor setback than anything else. Even though Giulia didn't have a hard time moving on from Filippo, the same couldn't be said for Filippo. Even though things looked okay on the surface, they were anything but perfect on the inside, because Filippo was an emotional, angry, and possessive guy who wanted Giulia all to himself. It seems clear from this that Giulia must have been the one to break things off, not Filippi, and he was willing to do anything to get Giulia back. According to Giulia's sister, Elena, Filippo had a habit of acting irrationally at the best of times, so when the going got tough, he could be incredibly unpredictable. He would constantly bombard Giulia with messages, always asking her where she was and demanding to know what her plans were at any given time of day. Filippo also took emotional advantage of Giulia, telling her that he felt depressed and had very dark thoughts about ending his life. Even after their breakup, Filippo was insistent that they get back together again, as he couldn't see a future without Giulia. Over the course of their relationship, Filippo sent Giulia almost 225,000 messages. That's not a typo, and you didn't hear me incorrectly. 225,000. That is almost 300 messages a day. Essentially, the undertones of every message were the same. They were layered with insecurity and jealousy on Filippo's part. He would constantly wear Giulia down by saying things like, "Come on, please, can you at least tell me if you started texting some guy? Giulia, I feel terrible. You are destroying me. How can you think of starting to see another guy? It seems like such a violent thing towards me." Now, we don't know whether or not Giulia was seeing anyone else at the time these messages were sent, but that's not the point. Giulia and Filippo were broken up. It was clear that Giulia was uncomfortable around Filippo, and this is proven by her response to his messages, in which she said, "You made me lose trust. Your obsessive methods scare me. People look how you treat me, like a criminal. It's a control mechanism. Sick too. People, you are obsessed. You're a psychopath." You can clearly see the difference in Giulia's and Filippo's messaging tone. Filippo sounds downright mad at Giulia for breaking up with him, making himself out to be a victim, while Giulia can be seen reasoning, trying to make him see why his obsessive and controlling behaviors were wrong. Even though the couple had broken up, Filippo would still torment her every single day, and Giulia was starting to feel annoyed at Filippo's senseless behavior. But still, since Giulia didn't have a habit of resorting to fighting in a misunderstanding, she tried to make Filippo understand with reason every single time. But sadly for Giulia, reasoning with Filippo was like talking to a wall, who refused to take no for an answer. Not only was Filippo offended by the breakup that Giulia had initiated, he was also starting to resent her, and the reason for this was just unbelievable. For unknown reasons, Filippo wouldn't be graduating at the same time as Giulia, and this was something that bothered him a lot. Seeing a woman who was also his ex-girlfriend, who bruised his ego by breaking up with him, was ahead of him. He didn't like it. Giulia was paving her way to the future, and Filippo was still stuck at college. Filippo was egotistical, and seeing Giulia moving on with her life and preparing for graduation made him very bitter. There was something dark bubbling underneath, and Filippo would soon let it all out in the worst way. Sadly, Giulia would be the one to take the brunt of the impact, and she would pay for it with her life. The crime, November 11th, 2023, was a normal day for Giulia. She and Filippo would still meet every so often, but Giulia made it clear time and time again that they would never get back together. Now, some people might question, why? Why was Giulia meeting up with such an obsessive and controlling man when they were clearly broken up? Well, the answer wasn't that simple. Filippo, unfortunately, knew just how to tug at Giulia's heartstrings, and he emotionally blackmailed her into spending time with him. If Giulia refused to meet up with Filippo, he would threaten her with suicidal thoughts and make her feel bad. Giulia, being the ever-loving and genuinely caring person she was, saw no choice but to give in to Filippo's insistent behavior. This was also something she shared with her sister, Elena. Besides, Giulia was looking on the brighter side. She was days away from tossing her graduation cap. She would soon get her degree in biomedical engineering, and she was excited. On November 11th, she wanted to take a trip to the mall to buy some shoes for graduation. At around 6 p.m., Giulia went to a shopping center in Marghera, and she was accompanied by Filippo. Now, we don't know whether Giulia wanted him to come with her, or if Filippo basically guilt-tripped her into letting him join her. Regardless, the duo got done with shopping, and they even ate together at a McDonald's in the shopping center. Giulia's credit card activity also showed that she paid for both their meals at around 9 p.m. Afterwards, at around 10:30 p.m., the duo were seen leaving the shopping center, and 10 minutes later, Giulia sent her sister, Elena, who was in Vienna at that time for her studies, a message on WhatsApp. Sadly, this would be the final message Giulia would send anyone. The next day, after not hearing from Giulia, her father was very worried about her. It was unlike Giulia to not reach out to her father, especially since her mother had just recently passed away in the fall of 2023 from cancer. Gino's children always called and checked in with him. Elena was also worried about her sister because she wasn't responding to any of her texts. So she immediately started spreading the word on social media while in Vienna. She had an awful gut feeling because she knew that Giulia was last seen with Filippo, and now she wasn't picking up her phone. Gino proceeded to report 22-year-old Giulia missing at the local police station at around 1:30 p.m. on November 12th, 2023. The investigation. The police immediately sprang into action, and they started asking around for any information on missing Giulia. It was overall a weird and tense situation. Giulia was at the end of the line and was jumping up and down the walls about her graduation. She wouldn't just up and leave, deserting her family and her bright future. The police were also made aware that Filippo was the last person to be with Giulia, and to everyone's surprise, he was nowhere to be seen either. His parents, Nicola and Elisabetta, hadn't heard from him either, and this raised even more suspicion in the police's minds. While asking around, a witness came forward with some very alarming information. According to the bypasser who was standing over his apartment balcony, there was a violent scuffle between a young man and a woman in a black car on November 11th at around 11:15 p.m. The area was 150 meters from Giulia's house, and according to the witness, the girl screamed out for help, which caused the witness to call the police. But no one came, as all of the units were busy, and the nearest help was about 45 minutes away. The police took note of the black car, which was a Fiat Punto, and not long after, the authorities came across another bizarre yet chilling instance. See, the police looked at surveillance footage from a factory located in the nearby town of Fosso, F-U-H-So, and it was very unnerving. The footage is the very frightening recording of Giulia being attacked by none other than Filippo. In this footage, police very clearly saw Filippo violently attacking Giulia. She even tried to make a run for it, and that was when Filippo heartlessly attacked her from the back, and he was seen loading Giulia's motionless and severely injured body into the back of his black Fiat Punto. At that point, the police had no doubt in their minds, and they knew that Filippo was certainly responsible for the disappearance of Giulia. A large manhunt for Filippo was conducted, and the news of Giulia's disappearance and Filippo's involvement was everywhere in the Italian media. Everyone was horrified. To think that someone with whom Giulia was in a relationship could turn so vile and downright deadly sent a chill down everyone's spine. See, Italy is a country where femicides and gender-based killings are, sadly, very common. It is a horrific act that is unfortunately deeply rooted in society. The culture of Italy is extremely patriarchal, dating back to the Roman Empire, Italian fascism, and Roman Catholicism. It wasn't uncommon in olden times for women to be categorized as second-class citizens. They were used as collateral, incubators for heirs, and they were taken advantage of in every horrific way you can think of. Even in the 21st century, Italy reeks of misogyny, and the killing of women in the name of honor is still prevalent. In 2023 alone, almost 109 women were driven to their horrific ends, and more than half of the perpetrators were men who had been in a relationship with these women. This was the country that 22-year-old Giulia Cecchettin, was living in. By now, the police had two very important tasks at hand. The first was to locate Giulia, and the second was to catch the criminal, Filippo. After 7 long days that felt like forever to the Cecchettin family, on November 18, 2023, the police, along with cadaver dogs, were led to Lake Barsis, Bar Cheese, and there, they made a discovery that crushed everyone's hopes in this case. Giulia's body was recovered by the Civil Protection Unit, and it was a horrific scene. Giulia's body, especially her face, neck, and hands, was covered in wounds. She was found inside a large nylon bag in a cave at 50 meters altitude, within a wooded area that is generally closed during the autumn-winter period for security reasons. Giulia Cecchettin's tragic story unfolded as a tale of premeditated violence and heartbreak. After a breakup, Filippo Turetta, her ex-boyfriend, meticulously planned her murder, tracking her movements with a spy app and creating a chilling murder list. Giulia, just days away from her graduation, was brutally killed, suffering numerous injuries that pointed to a crime of passion. Her loss left her family shattered, coming so soon after the death of her mother. Filippo fled to Austria but was caught within a week, confessing to the crime. He was extradited to Italy, where he faces charges of premeditated manslaughter, cruelty, and stalking. His trial began in 2024, with the prosecution seeking life imprisonment. Giulia's death ignited protests across Italy, highlighting the epidemic of femicide and patriarchal violence. Thousands attended her funeral, and Italy's prime minister vowed reforms to combat gender-based violence. In February 2024, Giulia was posthumously awarded her degree, a tribute to her hard work and spirit. Her family continues to advocate for change, urging society to tackle gender violence and raise better, more compassionate individuals.